Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out on this beautiful and slightly warmer day that we've had in Scottsdale after our own version of the polar vortex this past week. For a noir afternoon, you'd think I would have black refreshments, but because it's almost Valentine's Day, we actually have cookies and pink lemonade. It seems so wimpy with you two guys, honestly. But there we are. Anyway, I am delighted to welcome back Joe Ide, who is here somewhat after his third IQ book, Wrecked, but he's come over to talk to Stephen Mack Jones. Joe lives in Los Angeles, and Stephen is making a second visit to us from Detroit, but he was here for a conference we did for Ian Rankin at Labor Day last fall, so he has not actually been in the bookstore doing this kind of event before.
This is all new, so you'll pardon me if I have the feeling some of you are going to walk away going, that guy's not too bright. At least that's what my wife thinks.
So Joe, you're actually going to be the interviewer here. I know you've read Stephen's book, so I will just gracefully pass this over to you.
Hello. It's good to see most of you.
Who are you excluding?
Barbara knows some pretty sketchy people. So, tell us a little about yourself.
I'm a fairly boring guy. I was born and raised in Lansing, Michigan, which is 90 miles north of Detroit. And as I was saying earlier, it might as well be a world away.
The home of Magic Johnson.
The home of Magic Johnson and the home of General Motors' Oldsmobile until that was killed. But I went to Michigan State University, go green, and go blue. We're going to have words, so.
We already are.
A troublemaker in our midst, we've identified him.
This is what I meant.
Well, really just went to school in East Lansing. Parents were blue collar, put my brother and I through school on Oldsmobile money. Spent 30 plus years in advertising. Please don't hold that against me. And I have seen a therapist about that. And cutting to the chase, August Snow was my first book, and it was written after 8 years of retirement and just wanting to amuse myself during the day while my wife was hard at work.
Before you go on, what does one do in advertising? Is it like Mad Men? I don't know. People say I'm in advertising. I don't know what they're doing.
I worked on healthcare advertising and Ford and Lincoln Mercury. Also, well, let's put it this way. What kind of car do you drive, Matt? Ford.
It's a Ford Escape.
Ford Escape, great car. But did you know that motor oil is the life's blood of your car? So it was that
That
kind
was
of,
really good.
yeah, that's what I did, and I would go home, light a Novena candle.
You were talking about August before I interrupted you.
But it was really just to keep my mind fresh, to entertain and inform myself, and that's essentially it. You want to ask me where the name came from?
Where did that come from?
Well, I was thinking about the juxtaposition between man and God, and no, I wasn't.
I'm glad.
I was mowing the back lawn, and you know, there's nothing like a summer day where you're mowing the back lawn. It's zen with power tools, and the words August and snow settled on my mind, and I laughed because no, it never snows in August. And after a week, the words were still there, so I thought I only had two choices. Get therapy or do something with it as a name.
Wow, that was your choice.
That was it. Those were the only choices. Well, those were the only choices my wife gave me.
I understand.
You should really turn that back at him and ask him why he calls his character IQ
Oh,
or
yes.
Isaiah Quintanabe, which is not your ordinary garden variety name either.
And it's a beautiful name.
I made that up, and I had to find a name that sounded right and still use the words IQ. I thought that was a killer title. So the name sort of came second. And then the Q thing, not a lot of cool names that start with Q. And I thought, well, I'd like to give him an African-American sort of vibe. And so I looked up all these African names, and none of them worked. So I took parts of them and put them together, and that's how Quintana came.
Wow, that's nice.
Well, it turned out pretty well. So
Yeah.
So it's sort of your basic baby book operation where you picked up a book of baby names. I mean, that's a similar
Yes, that
thing
was
for
exactly
your parents, right?
That's exactly
Who knew
right.
that authors would do the same thing? Love it. Well, we digress. Sorry.
Well, Joe, what is your process? I mean, I know that there's the old debate of extensive notes versus seat of your pants. What is your process?
Definitely seat of my pants. I have an idea for a story, and then I write the first page. And I write the hell out of the first page because it sets the standard for everything else. So page 1 informs page 2. And I write like that in increments, a little faster now, but the increments inform the next section. I get about 50 pages, and then I look back on it, and I see what's missing, you know, what I could add. And as I start to fill in that 50 pages, I can look ahead and see where this might go, and how it might be interesting, and where I need a new character. And it gains momentum from there, but in a very unlinear way.
Yes.
It's not like I'm writing. When I get into it, I'm not writing page 28 and then page 29. It's like a pointless painting. A dot will occur to me. Maybe it's a character, and maybe it's a line of dialogue, and maybe it's a place. And I just do this as they come to me. Because ideas don't come to you conveniently. You know, and they don't care about your time schedule. So I just keep going like this until I start to see something. And eventually I have the shape of a book. And then it's just rewriting.
Yeah, and that's where they say, whoever they are, that the rewriting is really the craft. Do you feel, when do you start getting comfortable with a draft?
Not until I'm almost done. The prologue in IQ is about 2.5 pages long, and I rewrote it 26 times. That was the beginning of the book. And agents and editors have a very short attention span. They have
Just a
thousands of books.
Let
Yeah,
me move back a little bit here, you know.
not you, Barbara, just everyone else. Because they have all these choices. They have thousands of books they could read. And they react very quickly. I never heard anybody say, at least in the crime genre, that they read more than 25 pages. Most said 10 or 15. A reviewer told me that if she reads 2 bad pages about the weather, she's out. So I had to smack that 2.5 pages as hard as I could. Just a side note. By just sheer luck, the first person in the business that read my book was a woman named Esther Newberg, who's been head of literary at ICM in New York for 25 years. That was the first person. And the thing is, that's your audience. Somebody who's read everything. And so you have to kill early. You just have to kill. And that's why I work so hard on that section. And one of the things I tell aspiring writers is that before you do anything else, you have to learn to write at a professional level. Because these people don't play around. They don't mess around.
Yes.
And they're aspiring writers talk about marketing and talk about TV shows and all these kinds of things, just way ahead of the game. You know, even getting an agent. You can't get an agent until you have the book. And there are these sort of organized pitches where you can pay money, sit down with a real agent. But even if you kill that pitch, you still have to hand them pages. And if they like the pages, you still have to have the book. And that eludes a lot of aspiring writers. They're disappointed to hear that the writing is first. And no idea, no character, no possible franchise, none of that will save you. And that's disappointing to a lot of people, but I think, well, why should it be that way? You know, that's like the foundation of your profession. Anyway, so that's what happened to me.
Well, I got smacked by my agent early on, as far as this genre, mystery thriller. And my agent is wonderful. Stephanie is just great, but after she had the manuscript, she called me and she said, oh, this is really good. I really enjoy it. I'm at page 40 and nobody's dead yet. So, I mean, do you find yourself in that kind of situation where it's like, I've really got to move things along, at least for a second draft?
Josh has given me notes like that, where you need a set piece between page 30 and page 60. The readers are going to expect that. So there are places in a novel where you need pace and you need action, because that's why people want to read your book. And I get distracted by character, as some of you may know, and I'll forget that.
Right, yeah.
So could I add a footnote to what you were saying, Joe, in regard to, it's your first novel that all applies to. Nobody is going to buy a first novel until they have an entire book. They have to know that you can't finish a book. But you don't have to go through that whole process subsequently. So once they're confident that you have written a book and you can actually do one, then you can give them a shorter presentation. So
Yes,
I didn't want them
that's
to
true.
think that you had to go through that process every single time. But no first writer has ever sold a book on a pitch that I know of, unless it's nonfiction. You can sometimes in nonfiction actually get away with that if it's a really strong one.
If you have cred,
Yeah.
I mean, you have to know what you're saying. There's this speaking of first books, there's this misconception about advances and royalties and TV deals. You know, the marketing around aspiring writers makes it seem like there's plenty of room at the top, lots of wealthy writers. You can be one too. And neither of those things are true.
It's advertising.
That's right. They need you.
I really need to go to confession.
So we could say, because I didn't mention it, that both of these gentlemen were nominated for many awards and won major awards for their first two books. Stephen won the Hammond Award, which is an international prize for crime fiction and very prestigious. And then he won the Nero Wolfe Award, which is a very different award. Joe was nominated for what? The Anthony, the Edgar, trying to remember.
Anthony.
The Barry, probably?
Yeah, I was nominated for all of them.
And which one did you win?
All of them. Except the Edgar.
Still rankles, doesn't it?
You wouldn't think so.
Nonetheless, I mean, that's a remarkable achievement given, the number of potential candidates to score those more than one nomination for an award for a book is amazing. To score several is truly amazing. So why do you think that you guys got that kind of reaction, not just from readers but from critics? You got any thoughts?
You go first.
No, you go first.
This is not a comedy tune, guys. Come on.
Yes, it is.
He's bigger than me, so. I don't know in particular why it went the way it did. I think what all publishers will tell you is that what they're looking for is a fresh voice and great writing. They don't know what will work in the marketplace any more than anybody else. And so that's the two things that they look for. Fresh voice, great writing. And there's just no predicting it. And these gurus who say, well, YA is hot, write a YA book. It's just silly. It's just like, would anybody else make a career decision like that? Like dentists make a lot of money, so I'll be a dentist. It's just silly. If you're not writing what you have a passion about, you just won't last. If you don't have a passion for what you're doing, it's like saying I'm going to win the New York Marathon, but I don't like running. It makes my legs hurt, sweaty. You just can't be sustained by anything else, except your love of writing. And both of us get up in the morning, have our coffee, and then sit down and write because we can't do anything else.
You folks are familiar with Elmore Leonard, right?
Yep.
I had read this about him several times, that he was another veteran of advertising. But he would get up at 7:30, have his coffee and toast, pack himself a lunch, and go to his study. And he would write from 8 o'clock until noon, 12:30. He would, have his packed lunch that he just brought from his kitchen. He would have that for maybe, 45 minutes, an hour, and then he would go back to writing. And 4:30, 5 o'clock, that was the end of the workday.
Do you feel guilty, like when you go on vacation and you don't write?
It's been a while since I've had a vacation, but yeah, I do. And I keep referring to my wife, Mary Kate. She's back back in Detroit where I think I'm like 250 miles out of her hearing range, so we can talk. But she insists that I get out, that we do things. Yeah, I know. I know. And it's like,
So it's more fun to play with your imaginary friends?
yes,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. In fact, Mary Kate bought me a pair of socks that when the first book sold, and we were just over the moon, she bought me a pair of socks that said, "I make a living from making shit up." And it was like, well, why didn't you give me those in 30 years of advertising?
My wife said to me, "Sweetheart, do you know we're in Maui?" So it is an obsession.
Yes.
All right, well, back to my question, which neither of you has actually answered. although Joe came close by saying that, in fact, it's mostly the voice. You know, if you open the book and you are engaged with the character's voice in the first few pages or whatever, you will read on. And if you're bored, you won't, right? And that's true of booksellers as well as editors and agents. So you're certainly right that, you know, it's good to kill it on the opening and maybe sprinkle a body or two around. But I think what also mystery readers, for the people like crime fiction like, they also really react to landscape. It's either the culture or the physical landscape or both. And so each of you has a special landscape, and it's not a mainstream landscape, it's an interesting one. So, Stephen, what is it about Detroit, and how did your publisher react to the fact they were picking up a book? We talked earlier, so this is a leading question. I know you know the answer. What was it, your publisher's reaction to Detroit?
In the draft that Soho got from my agent, well, my agent said, I think we're in good shape. I'll call you in 2 weeks. Well, 2 weeks went past, you know, a month and a half. And, you know, you try to maintain your cool, you know, by separating the recycling, which I really hate, and making sure that things are nice around the house and cooking the occasional dinner. But inside you're just, no. Well, I finally got a call, and my agent said the things that you never want to hear, which is, you know, they're on the fence about it. Oh, hey!
Oh, great!
Ooh, what I've always wanted to hear. So, and we talked about it, and they wanted more, a sense of more Detroit. So I opened the Pandora's box and let Detroit out in all its glory and shame and, you know, beauty and pimples. So
I wanted to ask you about that. You know, you describe Detroit as really in decline, you know, like among the worst cities in the United States. And by the same token, it's clear that you love Detroit. And why?
Part of the answer is controlled schizophrenia. I love Detroit because of the way it just clashes and bangs and connects and disconnects almost every hour of every day. Contrary to a lot of belief, Detroit is a very diverse city. If you want Korean, authentic Korean food, we've got that. If you want Vietnamese, we've got that. Of course, we have tremendous Mexican food. The whole spectrum. And Detroit is coming back. In fact, Food and Wine magazine listed it as one of their top 10 destinations for foodies. What?
Right.
What? And you thought we just had coney dogs. See, you say that outside of Detroit and people go, the heck is a coney dog?
Right.
You get a hot dog, you put chili on it, chopped onions, a little mustard, and the same chili goes on your fries.
But you have to be a Greek guy to do it.
I make it at home, which
You
really...
make that at home?
Yes! I do.
Who else makes that at home?
At least
Well-
it's not that Canadian strange thing with the gravy fries.
Oh, poutine.
Poutine, right?
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, Detroit is it's a very tough town and it's a very generous town.
And it has some remarkable new architecture. It's been,
Oh, yes, yes.
because of the rebuilding, you know, the taking down and rebuilding, there's some really amazing things going up. Even the Detroit airport is very cool.
Yes, yes. How hot is Detroit?
How hot?
Right.
Well, it's so hot. No. Do you know who? I keep forgetting his name. Probably a willful thing. But he owns Quicken Loans and
Gilbert.
Dan Gilbert.
Dan Gilbert.
yes, yes. Dan Gilbert moved his headquarters to downtown Detroit, and not only that, he bought 40 other buildings in downtown
Yeah.
Detroit.
Yeah.
And nearly all of those are at capacity. So it's a comeback tale.
Isn't there starting to be quite a big art scene in Detroit?
Yes, yes, there is a wonderful art scene and wonderful support for the arts, courtesy of organizations like the Kresge Foundation, where if you're a painter or what have you, a writer, poet, what have you, you submit a short form, samples of your work, and if you're fortunate, you'll be one of, I think the last group was 30 people to win $25,000. And that happened to me. And it was like, well, you know, I'm old enough to, nobody gets anything for free. What do you want out of me? Well, at 6 months, we would like for you to write a report on what your current project is, but can you keep it to like half, 3/4 of a page? Because we're really, that's all you want?
I can do that.
Awesome. Now, the other thing we talked about, we did a little podcast in the back room, which you can listen to on our podcast channel. Detroit's a border city. Big border, and as Stephen pointed out, it's a border that you can't build a wall on, much of it.
That's right.
No, because you have 95,000 square miles of water. We've got the most shoreline outside of Alaska, and this is all freshwater. So we are one of the biggest entry points for human trafficking is Michigan, specifically Detroit. Contraband is a problem. When you consider that 1/4 of the goods that come into the United States crosses the Ambassador Bridge between Windsor and Detroit. So, yeah, it's
One of the subplots in your story is about ICE agents picking up the undocumented. How do those agents feel about what they're doing? I mean, I imagine there are some that are gung ho, but isn't there some ambivalence about what they're doing?
I honestly don't know, Joe. When you read stories, and I don't want to sound like I'm getting on a political soapbox, because that's underneath that box is just worms and spiders and everything. But in Ann Arbor, which is maybe 25 minutes west of Detroit, and this happened last year. Some agents went into a restaurant, Mexican restaurant, and they had their lunch for about an hour and 20 minutes. And instead of paying the bill, they arrested the chef. Because apparently the chef had sold a nephew a joint 5 or 6 years earlier. I don't know what kind of mindset that is. It baffles me.
So August Snow, your character, is both African American and Mexican American.
Yes.
So why did you decide to give him both of these cultural backgrounds, ethnic and cultural backgrounds?
Well, because those are the two largest minorities in Detroit, and they have rarely seen eye to eye. There's always been conflict, and I just wanted to show that, well, you know, somebody must have got along.
Well, and he already has a pretty well-formed identity, right? So you didn't have
Yes.
to waste a lot of energy giving that. What about
He's one of those characters that just, like, he doesn't suffer from a lot of angst. You know, he has doubts and things, but he knows who he is, and he's good with it.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, he's the product of, you know, a loving mother, Mexican American, and a loving father, African American. And like we were talking about earlier, that's the basis. You folks know what it's like. Anybody who has children, you try to bring your children up with a true north sense of what's right and wrong. And those are hard lessons to forget, to leave behind, you know, after you grow up or after they've gone on. I was going to say something about Jared Kushner, but anyway.
You just can't resist
Well,
tweaking that soapbox, can you?
I
Bad boy. Don't do that.
You do the same thing, Joe.
Yeah.
As far as building characters from the soul out, would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. I think the substance of character is the character's emotional life. You know, what they're thinking and feeling as they're doing whatever it is they're doing. You know, there's a tendency now to define a character in terms of expertise. You know, he can fly a helicopter, he can, you know, shoot you with 8 different weapons, and lifestyle. You know, he lives in a penthouse or lives in a log cabin. But that's just not character for me. You know, I'm not all that interested in the character who throws somebody off roofs. I can throw somebody off a roof. What interests me is what that character is thinking and feeling before, during, and after he throws somebody off a roof. And that's what will distinguish him from every other character who does that kind of thing. That I think, it's that emotional connection. I want the character to connect with you. Good guy or bad guy. You know, they may not have exactly the same views, but they have the same needs, and they work them out in any number of ways, like we do. That's where I start. That's where I start. When I'm asking myself, who is this guy? Who is this woman? I go there first.
So why did you decide that South Central LA was going to be the landscape that IQ is going to inhabit?
I grew up in South Central LA. Those years had the greatest impact on me. And I was saying that I loved Sherlock. And so Sherlock in the Hood was my only idea. I didn't have any other ideas. It's not like I was choosing. So it was really that simple. That's why I wrote what I wrote. It was the people and environment I knew best, and my hero.
Well, speaking as the reader, one reason that I liked your books, aside from identifying the voices, that each of them took me into a community that I wasn't familiar with, and I got to spend time there. You know, it illuminated things, educated me some, and I had a really good time. So, is that the reaction you were looking for?
What? I'm sorry. I didn't hear.
Was that the reaction that you were looking for? You wanted readers to be entranced, illuminated, and possibly even educated? No?
I can't say that was my intent. You know, some people have attributed those things to me, but they weren't in my head. That wasn't in my head. I didn't say to myself, you know, I want them to learn something. No. I write what occurs to me. And the only ideas I have are the ideas that I have. And if they turn out to teach somebody something, I'm glad. But I don't have any higher calling.
It's pretty much the same with me. It may sound simplistic, but when I'm writing, I want to entertain myself first. There have been times when, at least during the first book, she's over it now, but in our family room, there's the TV and there's my chair. Even our kids aren't allowed in my chair. And then there's a sofa table, and then there's Mary Kate's chair. So sometimes I would put my feet up and work on my laptop, and there were times when, you know, it was very quiet, and she was watching Ina Gardner cook something, and, you know, Ina's adding a little bit of parsley. And I would just explode in laughter, and I would have to scrape her off the stage. And then there were other times where, you know, she would look over and I would be typing, but I was crying. And she, are you okay, hon? Are you okay? It's like, yeah, I just killed somebody. She's over that now.
I walk around the house doing dialogue. Yeah. And my wife will say, fuck who?
Well, at least you're not sexting while you're at it, so that's probably a good thing. So, okay, whether it's intentional or not, whether you're writing to entertain yourselves, it's good that the reaction in readers is the one that I was suggesting. or at least true for me, even if you didn't consciously set out to do that. What a great thing that's what happened.
It is great. It's totally great.
Absolutely.
There's there's that thing about voice, and I didn't understand what voice was because it's not really style. I didn't understand it until I was rewriting, because when you rewrite, you're obsessing over every word. Like, is that the best word? No, is that the most precise, colorful word? I use a thesaurus 10 times a page, and you're going over each sentence, and you're asking yourself, is this good enough? Can I do something better? Do these paragraphs really flow from one into the other? And you're asking yourself thousands of questions as you rewrite. And I think cumulatively, it's the choices you make when you answer those questions. It's those thousands of choices that you make, because nobody else would make the same choices. But it assumes that you ask the questions in the first place. You don't ask the questions, you will never have a voice. You will always be generic. And I don't think we actually think about voice, but it's the work itself that creates that voice, that obsessiveness.
Do you think that process gets easier over time, or is it the same in every book?
It's easier for me. The questions come quicker. You know what they are, and you can answer them, and you're not aware that you're doing anything individual. But that's just practice.
I'm beginning to feel more comfortable. I'm still in the early stages, the early process.
No, you're not.
Well,
Really not. But since you're kind of in the shadow of Elmore Leonard, a writer who self-edited down to just exactly the right words and nothing extra, adverbs are your enemy is one of his most favorite statements, and true, I think. That's a high standard, to reach.
You look at, in Detroit and elsewhere, I'm sure, Elmore Leonard is one of the touchstones. Lorne Esselman is one of the touchstones. I'm really, really honored that somebody is actually allowing me to do this.
Can I tell you an Elmore Leonard story?
Yes.
You'll love this. It's an actual true story. We had, and still have, but a customer who's like a super Detroit lawyer, probably bills out $600 an hour these days or something like that. Anyway, big book collector, and never had met him, but we had, corresponded. So one day, Elmore Leonard was at Random House signing books for us, or was going to sign books for us, and some eager young editorial assistant, when she got the books, thoughtfully shelved them. So when he got there, they were gone, or they were on a shelf in somebody's office. So he went back to Detroit, and I then said to Random House, where are our signed Elmore Leonard books, which are all pre-sold? And they said, And then they came back and said, well, it was the editorial assistant. And I thought, what am I going to do? So I emailed the very expensive lawyer in Detroit, and I said, Bruce, I have this problem. And you're the only person I know in Detroit that might conceivably help me. And I know it's a huge imposition now, but if I were to send you 60 books by Elmore Leonard, would you be willing to drive over to his house and get them signed? And he said to me, you're kidding. He said, I'd pay you. So he did, We sent him the books, and he motored across Detroit, and he said it was one of the great moments of his life, because he got to sit there and visit with Elmore Leonard, while he was getting this little
Only
taste.
Barbara would ask somebody.
Well, that's probably true. But
Who else would
nonetheless,
ask that?
no, but what was interesting was that, that he perceived that as a gift and an opportunity, because he
Yes.
could spend time with Elmore Leonard rather than the imposition it actually was, on his time. And I think that Elmore Leonard connected so well with people and fans that, if I'd known you then and I had said, well, Stephen, would you have been willing to go and spend an hour or two with Elmore Leonard?
Anything to get out of the house right now.
Probably had to get Mary Kate to
The
sign off on it. Right?
The recycling's not done. No, there's another story about Elmore Leonard, and I have reason to believe that it's true, because I knew some of the people involved. But you folks remember Justified? Raylan Givens. Great character created by, the great Elmore Leonard. Well, as it happens, the producer of the show, Graham Yost, he bought the rights to that short story. It was called Fire in the Hole. And at the end of the story, I won't give it away, but somebody important dies. And apparently Graham Yost and his other producers were saying, okay, we've got a meeting with Elmore Leonard at the Townsend Hotel, their high-end restaurant. Who is going to be the one to tell Dutch Leonard that we want to bring this character back to life? And he dies in a really glorious, thunderous way in the short story. So they were very nervous about this. So the story goes, they met for dinner at the Townsend Hotel, and Graham Yost apparently said, we've been talking, and what would you think if we brought this character back to life?
He's already died. He's already dead.
He's already dead. And apparently Leonard's response was, well, first of all, guys, it's fiction. And second of all, I already cashed your check.
I thought he was the one who famously said that, maybe it was James Lee Burke, I can't remember which, but, basically writing a book was like, you created a car, you owned the car, and then if you sold it to Hollywood, somebody else now owns the car and gets to drive it. It's not your car anymore. So, I think at this moment, Ian, I think at this moment that we will wave goodbye to our video audience, and thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. And we're gonna hold on for just a moment here.